I'm just gonna sit up here. Ring the bell, man. Well, welcome to Voting Club with Randy. Appreciate you all taking time to be here. Before we get started, let's just keep our friends and neighbors to the south in our thoughts and prayers. Georgia and Florida have just been hammered recently by hurricanes, so we'll make sure we're mindful of that. But again, we're glad you're here. We have a number of guests, have a great program. Always good to have a high-level expert to talk about the state of the economy. So really excited about that. Before we get started, I'd like to ask Shirley Pennybaker to please lead us in invocation and the pledge of allegiance act.
Father, please be with me. Your son, Lord, we praise you, powerful and rising water. Glory to you, first, and to God, with thy spirit. Ever here we can speak to thy will. May we be ever mindful of our charge to keep service above self. Keep us mindful of our individual children, seeking education, mental, physical, and emotional opportunities that we have. And our work in materials around the world continue to pray for us as we seek vaccination polio and pursue the practice. Let's just do our bodies and we serve the legal way. Amen. The United States. Yes.
All remains you all having business. I'm getting the best on this day. First I have Brooks Robinson Snowbus, Shirley Green Snowbus, and Quincy Snowbus, and Jane Pierce. Ainsley Snowbus. and we can add guest materials. And lastly, we have here our guest, Susan Baxter. Welcome.
Thank you all our guests. This is our 100th anniversary this year, so we would love to have you back. So anytime, let Jake or let one of us know, we'd love to have you back as one of our guests. We do have birthdays and anniversaries to recognize today. Have a few of those. First of all, birthdays, Kevin Henderson on August 27th, Henry Jacobs on August 28th, John Harrell, John Harrell on August 29th, and Marquette Baker on August 31st. So wish them all happy birthday. So club member anniversary, Gary Scarborough, 10 years, Chuck Newman, 39 years. And then wedding anniversary, we have a couple, Ken and Marcy Miles, 34 years on August 26th. And Lee and Catherine, 45 years. Congratulations and keep up the great work. So, we do have a couple of club announcements. I've said this, beating that horse all month, but it is membership month. Susanna, you took it to heart. Jake, you took it to heart. Thank you all for inviting our guests. We have some great programs coming up, and we want people to experience it. So please, let's kind of keep that spirit going of thinking about guest invites for the years. Take a minute, Scott, here. Scott, we want to give you a quick update on the Grange Rotary 5K, so I'll have Scott come up and talk to you about it.
Give $5 for 5 minutes. Thanks, President Cook. On your table, you have a piece of paper that looks like this. I've already heard it's fine quality paper, so it's worth looking at and taking it with you. That's the intent. Hopefully they're enough here. Also, I brought my cell phone here. I think each of you have some sort of cell phone. If you would, go to Facebook and look up Grange Rotary on Facebook. Because there is a notice there about our Rotary. Yeah. So the best thing to do is like that, but then also share it with all your followers. Okay. All right. I want to go through this piece of paper. It's very important. We are less than a month away from the run, walk, whatever. So we are making progress, but there are some things we need. And hopefully you all can help out with help. Or actually, you can donate so I can rent some of this stuff too. So for the volunteers, and many of you in here have already signed up as volunteers, but I want to go ahead and narrow that scope down to make the sign. So the volunteers who have not signed up already, please email me with your t-shirt size and phone contact. I will use your email to communicate with you regarding your race day assignment. There's a couple of different places, but you can't say you have to get a I need somebody with a pickup truck because I don't have to volunteer hauling stuff early Saturday morning, the 23rd. Also a little bit on post race, will be later that morning. And possibly late Friday afternoon, trying to avoid that. But if you have a pickup truck, you don't mind you riding out with you and setting it up on Saturday. That's great. I need portable tables. These take like 6 foot long tables. In folding chairs, they'll be used to pack and pick up that morning, water stations, finish line snacks, etc. I need large water coolers. 5 gallon type. So we're going to have 2 water stations, one kind of halfway. 5K, one for turning spot. You intend, anybody that has if you're willing to loan one or 2 or more, and a speaker sound system, so that we can speak louder. But if we have any of those things, or are willing to support the rent, let me respond to Dean, got a phone number and email on that. It should be enough of these pieces of paper for all our open visitors. Sign, you're welcome to.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you and John working so hard. So all of you should have gotten invitations to the gala last week. If you would, please take a minute to buy tickets. Want everybody there. It's going to be a great event. Looking forward to having you with us. For those of you who plan events in our community, you'll know that the Range Community RSVP Challenge. We sting at RSVP. So just, don't wait till the last minute. Go ahead, get a ticket, and let us know that you're going to be there. We'd love to have you there. Also, sponsorships. We, as I mentioned, those companies that have been with Rotary for decades, we've asked you all to consider a $1,500 sponsorship to support the gala. We're going to check your house. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you all stepping forward. But we have about a week left to bring those in. So if you would let Ken Miles know. The idea of the minister, we have a chance to recognize former presidents who have been with your company, former members who have been with your company. So please take a minute, and if you have any questions, need additional information, let me know. So we do have a few minutes for Happy Dollars. What's the celebrate today?
A couple of days ago, my fifth late grandbaby was born, they were on. So welcome to the world. Join. I can't wait to meet her Thanksgiving. About one to two.
Happy to have Sharon here, and Lisa, as a reminder, is chair on the board for United Way. I hope that you will join me September 13th for our kickoff to the campaign.
And the follow up, great, that's what to do with that.
We spoke with you, but he's been invaluable in planning this 5K. So instead of a happy dollar, it's a happy dollar.
From the faculty at Range College, and President Baxter and Dr. McMullen are putting me to work to promote our golf farm. So if you see me, there's a QR code on this form. I'll bring a few more next week, as well as outside for the next few weeks. You can scan the QR code. We still have hole sponsorships available, title sponsorships, as well if you want to play, some availability of teams. So, support the college, all the money is going towards the student athletes and student athletic organizations. Thank you.
Well, if there's no more announcements, let's go ahead and check the program. I'll ask you later about the increase of
I'm very excited to have the opportunity to introduce today's speaker. I don't know how many of you can see it up there, but he's got a lot of letters after his last name. Those are not getting away, they are. And just so you know what they are, the CFA is a chartered financial analyst. CIMA is a certified investment management analyst, and CPA is a certified public accountant. Robert is an executive vice president and chief investment officer for Synovus Trust. He is responsible for leading and overseeing the investment strategy for Synovus Trust institutional and private client assets that total $17 billion. That's what he did. He has been made multiple TV appearances on Squawk Box and CNBC. He also speaks regularly on investment topics and the economy to individuals. Robert has over 25 years of investment experience serving high net worth individuals. He received his BBA in accountancy from the University of Notre Dame. He also received his MBA in finance from the University of Notre Dame. I have had the good fortune over the years to hear Robert speak many times, and he has the unique ability to take complicated subjects in the finance and economy world and break it down into layman's terms. Robert lives in Columbus. He and his wife have 3 children. His wife Audrey, they have 3 children, Autumn, Allison, and Woody. And it's my pleasure to introduce Robert Coon.
At first, when you said you were so excited to introduce me, was it because you didn't have to give the presentation? Well, I am so glad to be back. I don't know what it is, Jake. This is the 3rd time you invited me, and I've come each time. I realized this time I'm not charging enough to do this presentation. Free lunch is just not there. So I'm glad to come back to talk to you about the economy, where we are, and what's next. I think this is very important, but I'll tell you, this is one of the most difficult times to forecast the direction of the economy and the stock market in the last 25 years. And anyone who can give you a definite outcome is probably not truthful with you at this point. So it is really up in the air. So let's go ahead and look at some of the consensus charts on the expectations. So one of the expectations is the economy is going to slow. That may not be what your expectation is, but we grew at 2% economically GDP in the first quarter. We grew at 2.4 in the second quarter. And the third quarter, based on consumer spending and this last little blow off of summer spending, whether it's for concerts, whether it's for travel, it's probably going to give us a stronger number, maybe 3. Then we'll see about the fourth quarter and then first quarter. So I don't see an immediate recession based on negative economic growth, but more so probably a slower, maybe the 1%, 0.5%. We might even have a negative quarter in the next 3, but not 2 consecutive negative quarters. Let's look at the next one. So so then you have to say inflation. This is what's driving all the issues with interest rates, the housing decline we see, the financial institutions threat, and the like. And so one of the things you will notice is inflation has started to come down, maybe not as fast as we would like it to be. So the economists are saying inflation is going to grow at 2.5%, maybe 3 this year, and slowly get back to the 2% level. You and I look at more, and consumers look more at the price level. You go into your grocery store and you see the price has slipped up again even more. And it's gotten so bad that the grocery stores are just throwing up the price regardless of what you think it should be. So as an example, a couple years ago, I had a couple of dogs, price of a small little canned food, wet food is 80 cents. And then it's now $1.50. I mean, why is my dog food gone up double in a handful of years? I don't understand it. It's not as valuable, but they know that we're partial specs and they can afford to charge us more than we pay. So the price level for consumers is still too high. You're going to have to want to see the price hold firm for a long period of time before you believe that inflation has stopped moving higher. So the expected inflation to get back to 2% really won't be next year. It's not going to be until late next year or early in 2025. So the Fed is going to continue to want to lean toward raising interest rates. They may not, but the lean will be that direction. And then the last current expectation will be on the fact of the next slide, will be where we are with the Fed. What are they going to do? So they have raised rates a ton, including last month. They meet again in September. Probably not going to raise rates. That's just probably more of a pause to evaluate the data. And then they may decide to raise them in November. There is no guarantee as we move into an election year they will not raise rates, depending on the circumstances. As far as we know, their goals are full employment, which you definitely have met that, but 2% inflation. And the question on Wall Street is 2% high 2s, or is it low 2s, or is it exactly 2%? And that is being driven by what wages are going to do. So we'll see that in just a minute. So those are the expectations. Let's move into some of the factors that are driving these expectations. Consumer spending. We live in a world where consumers work, consumers spend, and that drives our economy. We make some things, we don't make enough like we used to. So consumer spending is a driver. Well, if you have low employment, 3.5%, maybe even 3.6, whatever the number's gonna be is coming Friday, which is likely to be a good number still, and people are still getting a month-over-month increase in wage, consumer spending is gonna hold up. So despite having known their last blast this past week, this period of time in the summer, we still think consumers are willing to spend. We'll talk about how they're doing it. So let's go to the next. How they're doing that, and what's happening is they've gotten used to a certain lifestyle. They had stimulus for those that received it, for those that got extra money, got pay raises, depending on opportunities, the jobs they've had, but they're facing two issues. On the left shows the increase in the credit card rate. So instead of paying 9 or 10%, the credit card rate is now 20%. So that's one of the factors for those that carry balances month after month. On the right side, you have how much debt has been accumulated. They have now accumulated more debt than before the pandemic started, and more debt than the great financial crisis. And you know what happened during the great financial crisis. So many borrowers went belly up. So they have been able to finance their lifestyle they've gotten used to by borrowing, drawing down savings, and for the moment, paying a higher level of interest. We'll see if that can continue. I don't think it will, but we shall see. On the next slide, they haven't had to repay student loan payments for those that this applies to. We've had a grace period for 2 years. So if the extra cash is starting to dwindle and you're starting to have to repay student loans, which is maybe $300 a month, on top of your $1,000 a month car payment for the new car or new truck that you might receive, you should see a big squeeze. And we're thinking consumers are gonna fold up their purses and pocketbooks, and we'll see what happens from there. On the next slide, what we have seen though, and this is where we're starting to track the trends of stress on the consumer, is they have started to be delinquent more so on the credit cards and also on their auto loans. And this is more so on the credit or borrowers who had minimum credit score, not the high quality borrowers, but more of those who struggle to meet their needs on a weekly and monthly basis. We haven't seen the same stress in mortgages. And that's because everybody's got a great mortgage rate and have equity in their house. You haven't seen it also in student loans because they've been on hiatus for 2 years. And then HELOCs also because the rate has been pretty good. So the stress has only been on the credit cards so far and the auto loans. We're going to see if that stress increases and if it moves to other types of credit. Employment. This is a good one because, like I said, when you work, you spend money. So let's look at this slide. There's two parts to this slide. So for the last about 18 years, each first Friday of the month, we've had a great jobs number. Over 200,000 new jobs, which is pretty strong for our economy. Last month, it came in at 187,000 new jobs, not far off the consensus, and then about 3.5 unemployment rate. These are super low rates. We haven't been this low since the 1950s. So this Friday, we're expecting to see a number of 150. So a little bit less, trending in the right direction, as mentioned on the left side. The Fed wants to see that number trend to less than 100,000, maybe even as low as 50,000, because there's such a tight workforce. So you think about it. If you're an employer, it's hard to find good people. There are many companies that are making less money now because they're afraid to give up their quality work. It's so hard to attract them during COVID, so hard to retain them, you have to pay them more, so you're hesitant to lay them off when business gets a little slow. So we're seeing that number go higher. Well, on the right side, you're having to pay them more because there's fewer of them available. So the workers that are available are getting a pay raise. The workers that come on board are getting more money. And the Fed is like, that's not what we need. To get inflation there, we need to get the pay there. So you're going to start to see probably in the fourth quarter, less employment. You might even see, as they call it corporately now, quiet firing. You're seeing people just kind of moving out of the workforce, some having severances, and over time, that number is going to go higher. We do anticipate unemployment going back to 4%. That loosening of the workforce will change expectations of employees and employers about pay, which will allow inflation to come in. And so when you and I go to the grocery store, those prices won't change as often as they have in the past. On the lending side, for financial institutions, on the next slide, I thought this was interesting to show the differences between the top 25 banks and the remainder of the banks. So just to let you know, Jake didn't mention this, to notice there's 40 in the country, so we're not in the top 25 yet. But these are the components. You have the first one is commercial real estate. We'll talk about that in a minute. The next one is residential real estate, commercial industrial loans, and consumer loans. So in the first one, commercial real estate, which is the unknown, the one that's been going to be speculated on the most, it shows that the smaller banks make the majority, whole majority of the loans. In all the other categories, the larger banks are the majority providing those types of loans. But overall, the growth comes from the smaller banks. So the larger banks have the loans, but the smaller banks cumulatively make more of those loans. So a word about commercial real estate. In commercial real estate, we haven't seen the worst of it. And that's because the financing of those deals will not come due until next year at this time. You have leases that are going to come up next year. And if I'm a tenant, I'm going to want less space for a discount. And then the banks haven't written down all the value in those loans yet too. So we haven't seen the worst of commercial real estate. I would say things like office space in the Atlanta market is going to be a tough sell, especially if it's not pure Class A. And then you're starting to see some weakness in shopping malls, indoor and outdoor shopping malls. So we expect that to continue. Commercial real estate, if you have money, you want to get a bargain, that's going to be your bargain in the years. For residential, we haven't seen that because on the new home side, the lack of inventory over the last 10 years, builders are able to offer discounts. People are buying, even though mortgages are over 7%. And so residential is in good shape. And those that own a house, they want a high price because they know it costs a lot to get a new house. So they have equity, they're not forced to move. Some of them are working from home. And so it's fine, So new homes is where the bulk is at activity. And then consumer loans, we'll see how that turns out. You've got a warehouse space, it's great to have at this time. Timber is still good, but the rest, we'll see how those go. Let's go into something else here. So this is, in case you didn't know, you can pull it yourself and say, where does my mortgage stand, my mortgage rate? Half of the mortgages are under 3 1/4. 2/3 of the existing mortgages are under 4.2. I do not fall in that category because I never refinance. But you think about your own personal business, and you can see why there's not going to be an issue on the residential side this time, because the rates are so low. And if you have a low rate, you don't want to refinance, you have the ability to draw value out of your house, you're going to be fine. But on the next slide, it has had a major impact on housing. So instead of maybe needing $2,000 a month for a mortgage, you need almost $2,600, $2,700 a month. That's a steep increase. And the rate is much higher, and the pricing is higher. Inventory is not there existing at this time. So housing has suffered. That's why they're one of the first areas to go into what we're going to call a recession, a rolling recession. We've seen it now kind of move into the banking sector. Technology suffered some too. They are starting to come out on the technology side, but other sectors are going to suffer too as we move through this rolling recession. The market outlook, which is what you really want to know more about. So let's take the first slide. This first slide is, I want to bring something that's maybe a little complex down to simple terms. So you hear a lot about this yield curve activity on CNBC or Fox or any other channel. And so really what they're saying to you is when short-term rates, say a 2-year rate, is higher than a 10-year rate, we as a financial institution stop and say, we don't want to make long-term loans. If I can get more money for a short-term loan than a long-term, I'm not going to do it. There's risk associated with extending credit for 10 years and expecting payment at 10 years. That borrower may be out of business, that borrower may not do well. So I'll give him a 2-year loan versus a 10-year loan. If I'm a business owner, that doesn't work for me because then I can't go and expand, can't buy the property, can't do computer investment and the like. And so my plans change. So we have it where short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. Credit tightens up. Credit for major projects doesn't exist. The economy can't grow, the business owner can't grow. And that's why they think a recession might occur. Now, if you look at these two, one is 10-year minus 2-year. That has not always been consistently accurate in forecasting a recession. But at least over the last 6 times, the 10-year minus the 3 months, which is really money market rate, has been a better predictor. No indicator is actually perfect, but that's why they keep harping on those yield curves and trying to use it every day. Because they're saying previously they've worked, they may work again, but they talked about a recession coming since last fall. And here we are, almost a year later, and nothing's happened. On to the next one. So there was a study done that said, when does a recession normally occur? Which year? Tied to the presidential cycle. And so this goes back past President W. Bush, past President Reagan, all the way back, as far back as you and I can think of. And it says the most likeliest term is going to be in year 1 and year 4. So let's kind of overlay this with President Biden's term right now. So he came into office officially in 2021. That would be year 1. Well, we didn't have a recession. That was the highest likelihood of a presidential recession in the presidential cycle. Year 2, that was last year. So no surprise. Year 3, when it was predicted to have a recession, was the lowest probability year. We haven't had it. We're down to 8 months. Probably likely we're going to have it in the last 4 or 5 months. But as we move into next year and the year after, regardless of who's in office, the probability of recession gets greater. So yes, could it be? It's likely based statistically, but there's no guarantee. You never know the timing of recession, and you never know the magnitude. And I always get a little, bent out of shape when people say recession, because in your business class, there's always talk of recession. It's part of the normal business cycle. And if you're the person who survives a recession, you get more business, less competition, and more profit. So I don't look at it negatively all the time, but it's just a part of something that's going to happen on an ongoing basis. Let's move on. This, I think, is something you can take with you to say, why is the market up some years and the economy is poor, and vice versa? So last year, the economy was so-so, and the market was terrible. This year, the market is pretty good, and the economy is just kind of so-so. And these are the different factors. So on the left is what drives the economy, and on the right is what drives the global company. So for instance, the economy is based on domestic consumption. That's all it cares about is how much can we do. S&P 500 companies, they want to make money all over the world. So there's a difference. If the rest of the world's doing fine, the US is suffering, they'll be okay. Consumption driven versus investment driven, short oil versus long. And that basically means short oil means I want the price of oil to go down. Because that's the maybe the price of oil to come down, the cost of goods go down, profit goes up. Whereas long oil, that means I can charge more for my products to other countries. Service-oriented versus manufacturing, imports versus exports. Obviously, I want to be able, I have to import most of my goods if I'm a business, export and trying to sell more stuff overseas. And then the stronger dollar, the weaker dollar, kind of similar. If you have a strong dollar, your currency allows you to buy more at cheaper price. Whereas you have a weaker currency, it allows other countries to buy more of your goods at cheaper price. And so you can see the rest. So that's why they don't always move in the same direction at the same time based on the same data. But I hope that would give you some insight. Continuing on, what really drives the market is profits. And we've reached the point now to 3 quarters where profits are no longer going to be forecasted to be lower. So if profits are going to trend higher, the market over time should trend higher. It's not always a 1-to-1 correlation, but they do move in the same direction over time. So if profits are expected to be higher in the next 12 months, then we should expect the market to hold in to be higher in the next 12 months too. And then continuing on, so issues. Now this is where you want to pay attention to what we're looking at to see what's important. The first one is going to be the price of oil, gasoline. It's gone up 20% in the last 8 months. So it's a little bit higher per pump now. It's probably going to trend higher over time. And you say, why would it trend higher? If we may have a recession, well, we have a shortage of output. We still have to refill our reserve here in the US of oil we use to help reduce the price. And there's still a little thing about the Ukraine invasion that's taking place. So the price of oil, which also impacts inflation. So if the price goes up, inflation statistics may go up again, which puts the Fed more on track to maybe raise rates. So the price of oil is a major component, not only for the overall number, but for the core number too. Another issue is the potential strikes. You've read about the strike in Hollywood, for the writers. in actors. Now we're facing a strike for UAW. And normally in the past, they would strike against one of the three, which would be either GM, Ford, or Solaris. Solaris is going with G and also Price. This time they said we're going to strike against all three at the same time. So there'll be no production. That's amazing. They want a 40% increase, like the pilots have gotten in American, Delta, and other places. I'm not sure they're going to get it, but they're going to get an increase. And so that's going to cause inflation too. Now, it's not a lot of people, it's a lot. Absolute term, but not a lot as far as our working population. But those expectations, hey, my buddy had 40%, I need 40%, Jake, I need 40% because they got 40 at UPS. Let's keep that in mind next year for the budget as we move forward. The debt ceiling. This is going to be a major one. It's going to be a lot of consternation coming up in Washington. They're on recess. They come back to work in September. There's going to be a shutdown. I don't know if it's going to be a couple days, a couple of weeks, maybe a month. We've had a shutdown before. I would highly anticipate another shutdown over the debt and the spending. The spending continues to increase, whether you like it or not. This is actual data. And the numbers, our budget deficit is to be worse every year. It hasn't started in the last couple of years. It goes back at least 20 years since we last had a surplus. So we spend more and more each year, whether it's based on retirement benefits and the like, or whatever it might be at that time. On the next one, the cost of that debt is becoming very expensive. So you got a component now that's going up. It's like your budget. This component is going up. Think about utilities. This component is going up. I have no control over it. Most of our debt is at short maturities, less than 3 years. We have to roll those debts over. We have to pay a lot more because rates are higher. That's going to make our interest go up. Our budget deficit will be greater, or we have to reduce spending in some other area. We have not shown the ability to do that, or the willingness to do that. So the fight in Washington will be over the spending. And so whether you're on regards to which side it is, there's a very thin majority, very thin working majority on either side. And I think you're going to see them decide to shut down government to make them home. And one last area to worry about is China. You know, this used to be the growth driver, the second biggest economy in the world. We have started to move business away from China very quickly. And so they're no longer our largest trading partner. Actually, Canada and Mexico have both moved ahead of China. They're third place. So, you know, I'm not worried about them, but I'm worried about how they grew in the past. They're going to have a debt bubble from all their building houses and the like, the variable credit, especially if they can't make economic growth. So these are the issues we're focusing on right now at this time to see how the market may end them. I think that's it. Yes, sir. Dave, if you have time and trip, I'd love to take questions. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, sir.
We got a nice presentation a few weeks ago from somebody from the Federal Reserve. They gave me a new appreciation on the influence of the Fed on economics and inflation. And part of that, I tend to think more about federal spending as a big driver in the economy. And I don't know, this might be an impossible question, but is there a way to get a percentage to how much federal spending for the activities of the Fed on the economy as a whole? Is there a way to scientists that use?
I don't know the exact answer to that. From what I know about the spending is that, for instance, this past year, because inflation was so high, we automatically increased like Social Security, defense spending, those things automatically went up. So that was whether it's good or bad, that went up. And then the Fed, what they have to do is issue bonds to cover that deficit. And for now, they've been able to issue bonds and find buyers. But if other countries, like China, Japan, any other countries decide to buy less of our securities, the yield of the price of those bonds, the price comes down, the yield goes up. So we didn't have to pay even more. So the Fed is there, they're supporting us, but they're hampered by spending on the government side, especially the automatic increases every year. But I don't have the percentage. Yes, sir.
Looking way into the future.
Yes.
Hopefully we're way into the future. How and when will the total US debt. Back.
Is it good or bad? The bad is the debt's gonna be higher because, like, for instance, in my case, I haven't retired yet, but I'm looking forward to getting my social security. And so there's still several of us who are gonna get money, and many of us hopefully will live long enough to collect benefits for a long period of time. So if there's no change, that's gonna drive it up. But what I can tell you is we're not the worst as far as budget deficit relative to our total economy. So it's kind of like when if you were out if you're out on a hunting trip and you're out and there's some wild animals and there's 2 or 3 of you, you know, as long as you're not the slowest one, you're okay. We're not the slowest. We're not the slowest. So,
As I look at your issues slide, things that I didn't see there, I was always curious at somebody at your level. Devaluation of the dollar by external forces, whether it's BRICS, whether it's related to the end of the petrodollar, you know, that causes concern, and, you know, we repatriate trillions of dollars, having nothing to do with that printing money, and we have a serious problem. How do you factor that in and make the decisions?
I do factor that in, and I look at even alternatives such as, and we don't support this, Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So we don't support those because it's not regulated, because there's some various issues, but that's not one of the alternatives. So you look at alternative currencies, whether it be the yen, you should buy Japan, or the yuan, you should buy, you know, China or any other currency, euro. Those countries are not doing as well as the US, so we're okay from that standpoint. But we do factor that in. I mean, we do look at runaway inflation, we do look at governmental, you know, imbalance in Washington and figure out how all of that works. But for now, we feel like we're okay. Saw the rating agencies take corrective steps to reduce our credit. We're still a quality credit. And so for now, we're okay to continue to invest money here in the US and internationally. I think initially the market, I think that's what it's going to take to get Washington to understand what's going on, like it did last time. So if it's a quick shutdown or we get an extension, that's okay. If it lasts more than a week, the market will be down quite a bit. The rating agencies will be all over this. People will be rethinking their plans to spend and invest, which then can also cause recession. So Washington's issues can become mainstream issues too.
Thank you, Jay and Drew, for bringing this quality program. In order to be speaking, some efforts we do have some great programs coming up. Next week, Pace Halter, President and COO of the Real Estate Division of WC Bradley. Excellent story. It's not just about what they do, but their history with Coca-Cola. September 13th, what's going on there? So please let Kelsey know if you can attend and do your best to try to be there. September 20th, Danny Canso, Director of Legislative Strategy for the Georgia Budget Policy Institute, a great presentation on the legislative session from a budgetary standpoint. And September 27th, everybody try to be here. That's our 100th anniversary. We'll have District Governor Andre Morais with us. We'll take a picture out front. It's going to stand for the next 25 years. So, or long. So there's nothing else for the good of the group. Thank you.